everyone. Myself, Mrs. Rishita Patel, working as Assistant Professor at Department of Pharmacology, Induka Kaipkowala College of Pharmacy, the Charutar Vidyamandal University. Today we will be learning topic Homeostasis and Control System. This topic present in course Human Anatomy and Physiology 1, represented as a course score 108010101. So let's start learning. So first of all, we'll see learning objectives. So after completion of this topic, you can come to know what is homeostasis, what will be or what is control system, and you can describe its component. You can define negative feedback system with example. You can also define positive feedback system with example. Also, you can compare and contrast positive and negative feedback in terms of relationship between responses and result. So, first of all, what is homeostasis? So, remain unchanged. Homeo stands for like, resembling of same kind or status that is standing still. So, that means maintain body function within specific livable ranges, adjusting to internal and external changes. Okay, so maintain body function within specific livable ranges, or also it is known as a homeostasis, that means remain unchanged. Temperature, nutrient concentration, acidity, water, sodium, calcium, oxygen, as well as blood pressure, heart rate, respiratory rate. These all are some kind of internal body variables, and these all variables must remain constant within a certain range. When the body fails to maintain internal body variables within a certain range, normal function is interrupted and disease or illness may start or may result. So anything that must be maintained in the body within a normal range must have a control system. So a control system that consists of four components. We are talking about control system of homeostasis, and it is made up of four components. First one, that is known as a stimulus or physiological variable. So that stimulus that changes in the item to be regulated. Variable in the broad sense is a value that varies or changes. So here we can see the example. First, that is change in the body temperature. Second, change in the blood glucose. So over here, body temperature and blood glucose, it acts as a stimulus, or it also known as a physiological variable. So anything that can be measured and varies is known as a variable. Second one is a sensor or sensory receptor. So basically sensor or sensory receptor in our body, the this sensor or sensory receptor present in cell, they may present in tissue, they may present in organ, and they are responsible for senses the change in the stimulus or physiological variable. Over here is the example. Sensory nerve cell ending in the skin, they sense a raise in the body temperature. Specialized cell in the pancreas, they sense a drop in the blood glucose. So sensory receptor or sensor provides input to the control center. Third component, that is and most important one, that is known as a control center. So it is the body structure that determines the normal range of the variable or set point. So over here in our body, brain, that is known as a control center. Various areas that are located in the brain, they act as a control center. We can put one example over here, hypothalamus. So hypothalamus determines the set point of body temperature. So we know our normal body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So that set point is regulated by hypothalamus. Specialized cell in the pancreas that determine the set point for blood glucose around 70 to 100 milligram per deciliter. So to maintain homeostasis, the control center respond to change in the stimulus received from the sensor by sending signals to the effectors. So that is the main function of control center. Okay, so what control center will do? It receives the responses from the stimulus or receptor. It interprets the responses and it sends signals to the effectors. Okay, and the last part of homeostasis component, effector. So effector is the cell, tissue, organ that respond to the signal from control center and provide response to the stimulus or physiological variable that change in order to maintain homeostasis. Okay, so what a effector will do? It respond to the signals from control center and provide response to the stimulus, or it may correct the physiological processes. Over here is the example: sweat glands. Effectors throughout the body releases sweat to lower the body temperature. Okay, so sweat glands, they act as a effector. They respond to the control center and releases the sweat, and it lowers body temperature. So it regulates the set point. The cells of the liver, they releases glucose to raise blood glucose level. So this figure represents the component of homeostasis. Okay, so first there are basically four components that we learn. One is a stimulus, okay, or we are also knowing as a physiological variable. So they normally change senses the change occur in the internal environment. This change that sensed by the receptor, because stimulus produces now impulses. This now impulses, uh, it got sensed by the receptor. They are also known as a sensory receptor, or they produces input. So this input will go towards the control center. Normally brain acts as a control center and it produces set point. So change is compared to the set point. Brain will analyze that input and it produces output. Output go to the effector. Normally in our body, skeletal muscles and glands, they act as an effector, and effector will produces responses. It results in the different. It result in the generation of response or changes corrected. So this is the flow diagram, or this is the figure that represent the part of homeostasis or component of homeostasis. Now, in our body feedback system, that can be produced either negative feedback system or positive feedback system. So, negative feedback mechanism, if the responses reverse the original stimuli. Over here is best example, that is blood pressure. Positive feedback mechanism, in that responses enhances or intensifies the original stimulus. Example is childbirth. Most control system maintain homeostasis by process, and that is known as a negative feedback system. In our body, 70 to 80% processes that is controlled by negative feedback system. Negative feedback prevent physiological variable or body function from going beyond to the normal range. It does this by reversing physiological variable change once the normal range is exceeded. Okay, so it actually regulates the setting point. Okay, normal physiological or variable change. And it basically regulates the normal range. The component of negative feedbacks are sensor, control center, and effector. So this diagram represents the negative feedback loop that is made up of stimulus, sensor, control center, and effector. Over here is the best example, that is the regulation of body temperature. So if body temperature exceeds more than 37 degrees Celsius, this uh, this changes is measured by stimulus. Then nerve cells that present in the skin and brain, they generate it. This stimulus produces impulses. They will travel to the receptor. Nerve cells in skin and brain. Then this receptor cells produces impulse and it will travel to the temperature regulatory center in the brain. Basically, over here, hypothalamus, they responsible for thermoregulation. It interprets the data and it produces output. Output will travel to the effector organ. Over here, effector organ is a sweat gland, and the glands produces sweating throughout the body, and it reduces body temperature. So over here is response is reverse than the input or than the stimulus. Okay, so uh, response that set the accelerate body temperature, it regulates the normal, it comes to the normal body temperature. So that is known as a reverse in the response. Okay, over here is temperature accelerate and over here is temperature reduce, and that's why it is known as a negative. So here is the best example is body temperature regulation. Then comes positive feedback. So what is the function of positive feedback? So over here, this feedback system intensifies change in the body's physiological condition rather than the reversing it. Okay, as we seen in this negative feedback loop, the response always reverse than the input. Okay, but over here, in positive feedback, uh, that it intensifies the change in the body's physiological condition. So input, uh, what will be the input? The response is enhances the input. Okay, it intensifies the input. That's why it is known as a positive. A deviation from normal range results in more change and the system moves further away from the normal range. Positive feedback in the body is a normal only when there is a definite endpoint. Very few systems in our lifetime that run under positive feedback system. Only 10% conditions are there that is regulated by positive feedback system. So one of the best example is childbirth. So childbirth is one of the best example of positive feedback loop. It is activated only when needed. So what happens in normal childbirth? First contraction of labor pushes the baby towards the cervix. It is the lowest part of the uterus. Cervix contains straight sensitive cells and they act as a sensor that monitor the degree of stretching. Nerve cells send messages to the brain so that sensor and this straight sensitive receptor produces input impulses. This impulse travel to the brain which in turn goes the pituitary gland at the base of brain and it releases the hormone oxytocin. Okay, what brain will do? It will releases oxytocin hormone. What oxytocin will do? Oxytocin causes stronger contraction of smooth muscle, that is the effector or smooth muscles of uterus, and pushing the baby further down to the birth canal. And this causes even greater stretching of the cervix. The cycle of stretching, oxytocin releases and increasingly more forceful contraction, and it stops only when the baby is born. So at this point, the stretching of the cervix halt or stopping the release of oxytocin. Okay, so when this stretch receptors stop or cervix get hold, okay, no more impulse generated. At that time, brain stop releasing oxytocin. The end result in a positive feedback loop is to reach an end point as opposed to reach a set point as in the negative feedback. Okay, when this positive feedback will stop, when childbirth occur, this loop gets stopped. Okay, no more stretching and no more release of oxytocin. Okay, so this figure represents childbirth driven by positive feedback system. As you can see, head of baby pushes against cervix. Okay, here are the receptors present. A straight receptor, they act as a sensor. So they produces love impulses and it will travel to the brain. What brain will do? It releases oxytocin from pituitary gland. Oxytocin carried into the bloodstream to uterus, and this oxytocin stimulates uterine contraction, more forceful contraction, okay, more force contraction of smooth muscle, and it pushes babies towards the birth canal. Okay, and when this feedback stop, when childbirth occurs, okay, no more stretching, no more release of oxytocin, and it will this will end positive feedback system. So here is the comparison between positive and negative feedback system. So best example of negative feedback system, that is regulation of body temperature, regulation of blood glucose. In positive feedback, normal childbirth. Responses. So in negative feedback, it reverses the change in physiological condition. Okay. So it will reverse the input. Input, it will reverse the message that produces by sensory or sense receptor. In positive feedback, it intensifies the change in physiological condition. Okay, positive feedback never produces reverse response. Only negative feedback loop produces reverse response, and it produces normal set point, or it try to maintain normal set point. Negative feedback system result return to the set point. Positive feedback in result reach to an end point. Overall, negative feedback provides stability, and overall, positive feedback accelerate a process of completion. So, this is all about homeostasis. Now you understood what is homeostasis. So, here are some study questions. Uh, what is negative feedback? What is positive feedback? What is the difference between negative and positive feedback? Okay, component of homeostasis. What is defined stimulus? Okay, what is sensor? What is control center? What is set point? What is an effector? Okay, so this is all about homeostasis and um, what we can say, normal or balanced internal environment. Okay, so we studied what is homeostasis, how homeostasis in our body get maintained, or what is the component of that homeostasis. Okay, which kind of homeostasis process that run in our body, negative feedback system, positive feedback system, and you need to write down the system with the example, okay, in your exam. So, thank you everyone.